What is going on, everybody? This is Taetro here with ROLI to show you all you need to know about setting up your Seaboard RISE 2. And we'll also get into how you can start making your own music with this Expressive MPE controller. Let's get right into it. Here's everything you'll get in the box. Of course, your 49-key RISE 2 controller, a USB-A to USB-C cable for connecting to your computer and charging your RISE 2, a 3.5 TRS MIDI DIN dongle for connecting to external MIDI gear, and a quick start guide. The first thing you'll need to do before you get started is head to roli.com/start. Download ROLI Connect for Mac or Windows, create a ROLI account, register your Seaboard RISE 2 in ROLI Connect, go to the Software tab in ROLI Connect, and be sure to download all your included software. You'll get ROLI Dashboard, Equator2, ROLI Studio, and Ableton Live 11 Lite. More on these later. And don't just download the synths, make sure you also download the sound libraries and sound packs that come with those synths. Equator2 has 2 additional sound libraries. You'll find them by clicking the down arrow. The 2 included sound packs are found on the Sounds tab. And one last thing, you'll need to go online at least once every 4 weeks with a ROLI application like ROLI Studio or Equator2. This will allow you to retain access to your software suite and is just an anti-piracy measure. But now, let's get connected with our RISE 2. There are 2 ways to connect your RISE 2. Let's start by connecting it to our computer with the USB-C port on the side. You can also connect it to a mobile device. Here, the power button will give us some indication of the power level of our RISE 2. We'll see green when the RISE 2 is fully charged, yellow when it's charging, and red when it's low. I've already turned the RISE 2 on by pressing the power button, but if you want to turn it off, you can just press and hold the power button. Let's disconnect the USB-C for a moment because that is only one of the ways we connect the RISE 2. The other way is by, let's turn the controller on by pressing the power button, and now we can connect via Bluetooth. We can see the power button flashing blue, indicating that we're in Bluetooth pairing mode. Then, if we go to our audio MIDI setup, go to Window, Show MIDI Studio, find the Bluetooth icon, and in here in this list, we should find our RISE 2, ready to connect. We've now connected via Bluetooth, and our indicator light is now solid. If you're having any issues with Bluetooth connectivity, check the link in the description for a support article. And it's worth noting that the latest operating systems are recommended when connecting via Bluetooth, and that most PCs do not support MIDI over Bluetooth. I'll disconnect from Bluetooth for now and actually reconnect via USB-C. This way I can be charging while we go through our tutorial. And while I'm here, I'll also note that there is a pedal port on the side so we can connect a sustain pedal or an expression pedal, which we'll get into using later. Now let's get into all the ways we can make sound with the RISE 2. The Seaboard is different than a standard MIDI controller. And that's because it's an MPE controller, standing for MIDI Polyphonic Expression. This gives us even more control over the sound than we would have over a standard MIDI controller. It behaves more like an acoustic instrument in terms of spontaneous polyphonic control of the sound. So that means when we play MPE sounds with the RISE 2, we can play with 5 dimensions of gestural control, and we're going to go through all 5 of those. And this is all possible due to the silicone touch-responsive keywave surface. So let's load up ROLI Studio Player included with your RISE 2, with the Seaboard connected, and I've chosen a sound from Equator2 called We Had the Same Dream. You'll notice that this preset name has beside it a blue icon. Blue indicates that it is an MPE sound. You'll notice if I scroll through the preset list here, we'll see blue and orange. Orange indicates that it's just standard MIDI. But if we want to take full advantage of the RISE 2, we're going to be looking for the blue icons so we can use a fully MPE sound. And what are those 5 dimensions of gestural control we have over the sound here? The first one we're used to using with any MIDI controller. It's called strike. Strike is the velocity at which we hit a key. So how hard or how soft we play a key will affect the sound. Playing it softly or hitting it a bit harder. Usually it has an effect on the volume of a sound. The next gesture is glide. We can glide down or up between key waves. And we can even glide in these 2 ribbon spaces above or below the notes. The glide gesture can help us make really cool bend sounds. Next, we have slide, which helps us add more texture or a different timbre to our sound. We can do this by playing a note, sliding up the key bed. Hear that change in sound. And as we come back down, get centered again. and that's slide. We also have press. After we've used strike, after we've pressed down on a note, we can add pressure to change the sound. How we release a note can actually affect a sound too. I can either gently release these notes or aggressively release them. You can think of it as a combination of pressure and the velocity at which we let go of the keys. All of these gestures can be used to make your tracks more expressive and unique, and the gestures can have different effects on different sounds. For instance, when I play this preset, adding pressure adds that wobble to our sound. But if I load up more of a woodwind sound, like this mellow duduk sound, adding pressure is actually adding more air to our sound. You may have to experiment and find different ways of playing depending on the sound you're using. You may want to adjust the responsiveness of these 5D gestures to get the right performance and the right level of responsiveness from your sound. You might want to even turn off certain expressivity completely. There's two ways we can do this. The first one is using the touch faders right here on the Rise 2. First, let's make sure we're in expression mode with a light blue indicator on our power light. If you're not sure, just press the power button until we have the correct color. The first slider controls glide. So if we pull this all the way down, you see that I'm not able to glide between these two notes like I was before. If I bring it back up, we're fully able to glide. Of course, we can put it somewhere in the middle if we want to split the difference. We'll still be able to glide, but it won't be as sensitive. The second slider here controls slide. Let's pull it all the way down, and you'll notice I am doing the slide gesture, but I'm getting no effect. Bring it back up, and we're able to transform our sound with the slide gesture. And on the final slider, we can change the press gesture. Maybe I don't want to make the wobbly sound when I'm pressing down real hard. Let's eliminate that. I can press down as hard as I want now, and no wobble. So I encourage you to play with these functions depending on what sound you're using. Perhaps you want 0 of the gestures at all, which will have your Rise 2 responding more like a typical piano. Or perhaps you want to dial them in a little bit, maybe halfway, 75%, or all the way up for full 5D expressivity. Glide is probably the best example of one that I might dial down, especially if I'm playing things like chord progressions, where I also want to slide up. I can sometimes have trouble doing that without actually engaging glide and getting somewhat of a detuned sound on my way up. On a string instrument, the bend sound of glide makes a lot of sense, but on a woodwind sound, it doesn't sound as natural, it doesn't make much sense. Or an even better example, a traditional piano sound. You wouldn't normally be able to bend a piano like that, though it can be fun to do. If you wanted a more natural sounding piano, we could just tap the bottom of the slider, turn glide all the way off. So each key wave will react like a normal piano key. Since we've been using the faders over here on the side panel, let's at least talk a little bit about the other controls on the side panel. First, I've already used this one a couple times, but octave up and down. We can use this to adjust the range of our Rise 2. We also have an XY touchpad that will give us even more control over the sound depending on the preset. More on that later. And we've also got the preset browser above, which using these to scroll through a compatible synth like Equator2, allowing us to switch between presets right from RISE 2. Beyond just using the touch faders, we can dive in deeper with these expressive settings in ROLI Dashboard. Dashboard is also essential for downloading firmware updates for your RISE 2 and getting the settings right for your DAW and third-party synths. Make sure you download Dashboard from ROLI Connect, and once you've connected your RISE 2 with ROLI Dashboard open, and if a firmware update is available, you'll be prompted to update, and just make sure you keep your RISE 2 connected through that process. But now let's run through the MPE settings here in ROLI Dashboard. So under MIDI settings, we've got MPE mode, which will allow us to take full advantage of the sounds that we were just using, MPE compatible sounds, using all the fancy 5D gestural control that the RISE 2 offers. Next, we have piano mode, which we've kind of touched on this concept already, but that just turns off the glide gesture in case you want to use RISE 2 as a more standard keyboard controller. Next, we have single channel mode, but before we switch to it, I'll stay in MPE mode. And what you'll notice is as I play multiple notes at a time, they each get their own independent parameters. So I can play C down here and the C up here as I slide. The lower C, it's not affected by that slide. So now if I play multiple notes here, I only have to apply a gesture to one of the notes to get a reaction for all of the notes. They move together in single channel mode, not independently like in MPE mode. And then we have multi-channel mode. In this mode, RISE 2 sends data through a set number of channels, so you can expand to having 2 or more notes respond to expressive gestures. This is helpful for synths that aren't fully MPE compatible, but do offer some level of polyphonic expressivity. As you can see here, you can set the individual channel MIDI data, the channel data to get it just right for the MPE or non-MPE synth that you may be using. Check out the support page linked in the description for more info on how to get this just right. Now you've probably already noticed these visualizers here for each of our 5 dimensions of control. These give us a visualization of what's actually happening when we adjust these parameters. For instance, if I go ahead and turn glide off, we see we go from a curve to more of a straight line, indicating that there's no change. As I slowly start to slide up, we see that straight line become more and more curved until it's a fully diagonal line. Making that gesture the most sensitive it could possibly be. When glide is set at its maximum 100%, this is called semitone legato. If you play 2 adjacent notes, pitch will glide smoothly from one note to the next. If you don't want to have the semitone legato effect, just reduce glide to below 100%. Each of these respond in real time, so if I'm using the touch fader to adjust a slide, we will see it adjust in real time, along with pressure, same thing, but we can also use our mouse and manually adjust these as well. I'm just click and dragging up and down on these faders here on screen. Don't forget that you might also have to adjust settings within your DAW or within your synth to make sure that it's MPE ready for the RISE 2. So using the touch faders to adjust the 5D gestures on the RISE 2 is only one use of these faders. We can also map these faders to control different parameters in our DAW. Not only can we map the faders, but we can also map the XY pad. So let's go ahead and make some cool effects and do that now. I'm using Ableton Live and I've loaded up this simple kalimba sound. Sampled it from an old kalimba I had. But let's make it cooler with some mappings. So to do this in Ableton Live, we're going to go to Live, Preferences, Link, Tempo, and MIDI. And one thing that's very, very important for this process specifically of MIDI mapping is making sure the remote box is ticked. But I do also want to make note of the fact that there is a checkbox for MPE as well, so make sure you have that checked too. And of course, make sure track is checked. Those are all the preferences we need to adjust in the DAW, but now let's make sure we're in MIDI mode on our RISE 2. And we can get there by pressing this power button once. We'll notice that the symbols for the 3 gestures at the top of the faders fade out, and our light also goes from light blue to a white. Now we can map these touch faders to control things in the DAW. To do this, let's go ahead into MIDI map mode of Ableton Live by pressing MIDI. You'll notice we have some blue overlay appear on screen. And let's click on the parameter we want to change with our first touch fader. Let's change the reverb dry wet on this rack here. And now all I have to do is touch the fader once, and it has recognized the fader. We see a little pop-up there. And to test it, we can go out of MIDI mode, and now we can move the touch fader. As I move the fader up and down, we see the reverb knob go up and down. And more importantly, we hear it on our sound. Let's repeat this process again, but now I'm going to open the side panel here, which usually shows things like our library or different effects. But when I go back into MIDI mode, we will see a list of our mappings here. So we see that first mapping, reverb, dry, wet. Now let's go ahead and map the delay, which is on a return track. So I'm going to click this button here, which is corresponding to our return track delay here. And I'm going to touch our second fader. We notice we get that pop up again. It gets added to our list. Fantastic. And as I scroll down to the end of the chain, I've got an auto filter here. Let's map our third touch fader to the amount on the auto filter. Go ahead and get out of MIDI map mode, and let's make sure we did this correctly. Let's bring all of these faders back down to their 0 position and test each one. We have reverb. We have delay, and I hear that auto filter kicking in. Zero, zero, zero. But don't forget, I said we could map this XY pad here. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's set that to a couple parameters. How about the dry wet on this echo here, and as well as the dry wet on this hybrid reverb, which will give a shimmer effect. Touching the XY pad. And the same for Ethereal Canyon. And now, out of MIDI map mode again, let's dial this in. I've got the hybrid reverb on my x-axis, while the Ethereal Canyon echo effect is on y. So as I move my finger around this XY pad, we're seeing the parameters adjust accordingly. Note that the bottom left corner of the XY pad will be 0 position for both X and Y. So that's a lot of fun to play with for sure, but there's one other thing we can map that I didn't tell you about. I have a pedal plugged in here. It's just a simple sustain pedal. It's below my desk. You'll just have to trust me. And we can also map that pedal as well. And one way to actually check if, as I step on the pedal, or as you do anything that sends MIDI to your DAW. For instance, let's just touch this touch fader without making any sound. Notice this yellow box in the top right. That's going to illuminate, indicating that Live is receiving a message. It'll do that same thing if I press a note. We see yellow flashes. It'll do the same thing if I adjust the XY pad. And no hands here, but watch the yellow box. Just trust that I'm stepping on the pedal. Hopefully, or maybe you can hear it. And it's flashing, right? That means that's sending a MIDI signal and we can map it somewhere. So let's have a little fun here. I'm gonna map it to this record button. What this will do is as I hold down this pedal, record will be engaged. And maybe we could create some type of loop or something. I don't know. Let's try this really quick. Once I press the pedal, we'll get a count in and start recording. You'll see the red recording light illuminate. I want to also note here before I start doing this, MIDI overdub is on and we're recording any automation that we might do with our mapped parameters here. So let's try this. And that's pretty fun to do. So a lot of possibilities here with MIDI mapping and the RISE 2. And don't forget that while you're playing, you may want to go from adjusting these parameters you've mapped back to controlling your gestures, because I may not want to keep bend on while I'm playing this kalimba instrument. So I can go ahead and turn that off from our gesture controls here on the touch faders. Pressing the power button once gets us back into our MIDI mode. If you noticed as we were mapping things in Ableton Live, we saw these little icons pop up on each parameter that we mapped. Those have numbers, and those numbers also show up here. And those are called our CC numbers. And that's because we're sending MIDI CC messages. Each of these unique numbers we can actually adjust in ROLI Dashboard. You'll notice each of the touch faders we can assign the proper MIDI CC number that we would like, as well as for the X and Y axis of the XY pad. And we can also change the CC and ultimately the behavior of the pedal. Each of these numbers corresponding either to a different type of pedal control or just a unique CC number. Now that you know how to dial in your settings for the RISE 2 in ROLI Dashboard, let's go ahead and start making music. And one of the simplest ways we can do that with RISE 2 is by opening up the ROLI Studio Player, which we've already used a little bit today, but let's dive a little bit deeper into what's available for us in ROLI Studio Player. ROLI Studio Player contains hundreds of MPE sounds that are great for performing or recording. Right now, I've got ROLI Studio Player opened up standalone, but you can also open it as a VST or AU in your DAW. We've got 4 sound engines to choose from: Original Equator, Equator2, and it's important to note here that you can find your Equator2 sounds within ROLI Studio Player, as well as Strobe 2 and Cypher 2. You can easily sort between the different sound engines, and let's go ahead and try a couple sounds. It's worth noting, just make sure if for some reason you're not getting sound, make sure you are connected via USB. If for some reason you're connected and still not getting sounds, you can go up to the cog icon in the top right corner, check your audio and MIDI settings, and make sure you see your RISE 2 under the MIDI devices, and make sure that your audio output channels are set appropriately. Okay, so let's filter by MPE sounds, of course. We want to have the most fun. And let's find a couple sounds to just play with so we can see the different things that we can do from within ROLI Studio Player. Let's try this touch lead. And Studio Player makes it really easy for us to get started having fun with these sounds because it's already got some macros mapped to the touch faders as well as the XY pad. So let's go into MIDI mode and let's adjust some of these. Pressure lag. Filter envelope shape. And delay amount. Let's try this XY pad. Dialing in chorus there, but that's not all ROLI Studio Player has to offer. We can have a lot more fun here. Let's find another sound, something that might sound great with chords. Let's try this Synco Future pad, and let's try the Smart Chord function. This will allow us to play a set of chords in a given key, and each key in that scale, we can adjust what type of chord we get. So as you can see, I'm playing one note, a C, and it's giving me a C minor triad since we're in the key of C minor. We can make these chords actually more complicated too. It's playing a basic triad now, but let's try to bump that up to a 6th chord. 7th. And now as we play other notes in this scale, when we get to G, we can also make that chord more complicated. And now with one note, we can start making chord progressions. We can even choose to add bass, which will add just a root in the bottom of the chord. And we can invert these chords as well. Which will give us the most natural sounding voices. Before we move off smart chords, let's pick one other sound here. Let me go to my favorites because I think I've got a nice harp sound here that would sound great with chords. And I've picked this sound specifically to show you the strum feature, which if we turn this up to maybe 50%, we'll hear the notes of that chord strummed through. Moving the strum functionality to the -% will actually strum from top note down. Versus when we were in the +%, we strum from low to high. And don't forget, while we're doing this, we can still have fun with effects. Don't forget that you can change keys here, so we could go from C minor to C major, and now we're in a major key. Let's combine this with our multi-layer arpeggiator. Let's engage that here. And what this will do, as you might have guessed, we'll start arpeggiating through our chord. Note that we can change the BPM here as well. I'm just clicking and dragging up and down. It is a fairly unique arpeggiator in that there are 3 different layers here. We're only hearing one layer at the moment. Well, let's go ahead and dial in a second layer. And add a different number of hits. Let's add a very fast layer on layer 3, 30-second notes. And let's have it play up the octaves. We can have a lot of fun with this arpeggiator. We can adjust things like swing. We can also adjust the rhythm to be a dotted, straight, or triplet rhythm, as well as adjust the direction of each individual layer. Also, the rhythm, the dotted, straight, or triplet parameter is per layer as well. So you can really go deep with this arpeggiator. And don't forget that we are combining this right now with the smart chords function, but if I turn off smart chords and I just hold multiple notes here, we can still play chords and use it like an actual arpeggiator and have a lot of fun. One last thing there is the hold functionality. So if I play a chord and engage hold, it will continue to play on. All right, let's disengage the arpeggiator and let's turn on audio effects. Now, what this gives us access to is a selection of audio effects. As you can see here in the drop-down menu, we have a number to choose from filters to delays, bit crushers, distortion, pitch, and reverb. And let's switch back to our We Had the Same Dream keyboard sound. I really like this dreamy keyboard sound. What we can do, we get kind of another XY pad here, where we can control each one of these parameters. Engage the distortion, delay, Even more dreamy with that delay. Reverb here. And each one of those 4 we can change, and we can also engage them with the hold function as we navigate and switch between different controls, assigning each one of these 4 options to the sound that we want. Getting kind of ambient and lo-fi here. And here's the multi-mode where you can see all 4 at the same time. So if we combine all these together, we get a fun way to just play with sounds. As you can see, you can have a lot of fun and get really lost in the sounds in ROLI Studio Player. And if you want more sounds, you can visit the ROLI Sound Store, where new sound packs are released all the time. All are compatible with ROLI Studio Player, and they're all being released for their specific synths like Equator2. When you're ready to take your MPE music making to the next level, pair your RISE 2 with your included Equator2 synth. Make sure you've downloaded it and downloaded all of the sounds available from ROLI Connect. This hybrid acoustic synth is an MPE powerhouse, featuring a library of hundreds of expressive sounds and incredible deep tools to even make your own sounds. You can find a whole host of Equator2 tutorials on ROLI's YouTube channel. Just like ROLI Studio Player, Equator2 can be used as both a standalone app as well as opened within your DAW as a VST or AU. For now, let's just take a quick look at Equator2. The first thing you might want to do is browse through some presets. So of course, at the top here, we can click our preset menu and we can sort and filter as we might want to by MPE or standard instruments. We can change from sound engines, Equator 1 or Equator 2 I have here, different sound packs or the factory library that you might have. And then of course, other filter types like mallet sounds, lead sounds, strings, synths, etc. I've loaded up one of my favorite presets here. I just love that sound. And once we're done selecting the preset that we want, we can go back to our synth. And although this might look a little complicated if you're not used to synthesis, of course we've got access to macros, which you've guessed it, have mapped to our RISE 2. Not only the touch faders, but the XY pad as well. I guess the only thing I wish is that I had more hands, so I could control touch faders and macros while I'm also playing sounds. And each one of these sounds will have unique macros that change the sound in a different way. If you want to tweak the sounds, I mean, you may be comfortable enough to go in and dive into, say, an amp envelope and change things like attack, decay, sustain, and release. But if you want to go deeper, again, make sure you check out ROLI's tutorials for more info. Of course, one of the biggest benefits to playing the RISE 2 is that you can play these highly expressive sounds and gestures without having to do any arduous mappings or automations within your DAW. But each DAW can be a little bit tricky on how to make sure you are set up for success with MPE. Now, my DAW, Ableton Live, I showed this earlier, but you have to make sure that in the preferences under link tempo and MIDI that the MPE box is checked. If that is not checked, we will not get the full capabilities of the RISE 2. Each of the other popular DAWs require some type of setup for MPE, and we'll leave a link to a resource on how to set that up for your DAW in the description down below. It is worth noting, however, that one of the leading DAWs, FL Studio, does not currently have MPE support. I would like to note too that playing a RISE 2, playing a Seaboard, is not like playing other keyboards. So there's a few things to keep in mind here. Make sure you're not pressing too hard on the keys. The Seaboard is more sensitive than your traditional keyboards. And keep in mind, especially when you're sliding between notes, don't apply too much pressure. You can get more dynamics by lighter touch. And it's just a much more nuanced sound. And also make sure you take advantage of the RISE 2's precision frets, which help you accurately find the center of each note so you can feel and play more accurately. And now you're making music with your new favorite MPE instrument, but let's make sure we know how to take care of it. The RISE 2's surface can easily collect dust, but make sure you clean it with a dry cloth, a lint roller, or unscented cleaning wipes. Do not use any cleaners that contain alcohol, as that can damage the surface. Store your RISE 2 flat and horizontal, rather than on its side when possible. A soft case is available at ROLI.com to keep your RISE 2 protected either at home or when you're on the move. And now you're ready to start making music with the Seaboard RISE 2. If you have any further questions, just check out RISE 2's manual or the helpful articles on ROLI's support page. Feel free to also get in touch at ROLI.com/support. Every RISE 2 comes with a 2-year warranty, so if you have any issues at all with your RISE 2, please don't hesitate to reach out to ROLI for help. And make sure you subscribe to the ROLI YouTube channel for more RISE 2 content, artist testimonials, and more. My name is Taetro. I've got my own YouTube channel with lots of tutorials and performances as well, youtube.com/Taetro. And that's going to be it for today. Thank you all so much for watching. This has been Taetro for ROLI. Have a good one.